The Ontario Real Estate Association, or OREA as is better known, is the largest business association in the province, providing services to a 70,000-strong membership. Home buyers and sellers rely on the expertise of licensed realtors in the purchase and sale of real estate throughout the province. OREA's task is to keep the standards of licensed realtors high and their knowledge current in order to best serve the interests of the public. OREA fights to protect the rights of property owners, working with government towards keeping homes and good supply and home ownership accessible by all these are just some of the goals and challenges of OREA. Mike Douglas is past president of the Barrie and District Association of Realtors.
Welcome.
And director at large for OREA. Welcome to Hitting Home, Mike.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us.
Pleasure to be here.
Can you just maybe give us a quick overview of why OREA exists and what it is that they do?
Sure. The Ontario Real Estate Association is there mainly as a service to its members, to start with, to encourage professionalism, education, support. It's now moving substantially into more of an advocacy process, which is great. Informing governors, informing legislators, ways to protect the consumer, ways to protect the public, ways to ensure that realtors are as professional as they can possibly be, that the public and the home buyer, the home seller, the home renter, the investor knows their rights. They're dealing with 100% reliable, professional, ethical, well-educated, well-informed people to do the work for us.
I think you actually, just sort of as an outsider to your profession, you touched on some things that I'm of the opinion, I'm willing to bet most of us who are thinking of buying and selling aren't actually realizing, aren't actually thinking about. We think, oh, I need a realtor to buy and sell my house. Well, why do I really need that? Yeah. And it's the advocacy side. Off camera, I use the term lobbyist, and we sort of chuckled about sort of the difference south of the border and here. But the advocacy side, the professional standards, the education. But you also talked about the landlord-tenant side of things. So I hope that we get to touch on some of that over the next half hour. But advocacy, you said you're educating the governors, you're educating the legislators, really. Exactly. Because oftentimes they come from a variety of backgrounds and they don't really know your profession.
Absolutely correct.
But they're the ones making the rules for your profession.
Absolutely correct.
So tell us about that.
Well, I'm not a legislator, but I know most of them are there for the right purpose, and they're there to serve the public in the best way possible. So they have the best intentions, for sure. But they don't know what we know. They don't know the situations that arise. They don't know the potential risks to consumers or the benefits to consumers with certain policies. So they have some good ideas, and our job is to make sure that they actually execute them properly so the consumer is benefited and there's no residual damage down the road. Yeah, and we've got some examples of that happened recently.
Going to say, as we were just talking before the show, you said it is a slow process, but it's a rewarding one. Yeah, yeah. And there are numerous examples of where we've been successful in lobbying government. And one of the more recent is the Home Energy Rating and Disclosure program. Yeah. This was a victory for OREA. Tell us a little bit about this and what's happened and how that benefits consumers across the province.
Yeah, sure. But I don't see it as a victory for OREA. I see it as a victory for homeowners.
Well, for homeowners,
frankly, and the marketplace in general. I'll explain that a little bit. The Liberal government wanted to bring in, it's called HER&D, Home Energy Rating and Disclosure process. They wanted to use, or they planned to use, the cap and trade funds with the goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So the idea was that if they can make it mandatory for everyone to do a home energy audit before you list your home for sale, that would create some sort of measurement, a score for each particular house or property, and the consumers would get used to that score, and there would be a motivation to improve that score by making your homes more energy efficient.
Kind of like emissions testing on a vehicle before you sell it.
Well, very similar, exactly. From OREA's perspective, and frankly, for most of us, I think, the idea, the concept is a good idea. Energy audits are not a bad thing. I think they're a positive thing. There were a number of weaknesses with it in that there weren't enough, there weren't any registered
who's going to provide these tests?
Yeah, there weren't enough
Where
people.
Would the standards be?
There was no constant standards. And secondly, why go after people just because they're going to list their house? Go after homes that are, not go after them. Let's look at auditing older properties first, but why not put the money into remedial issues, not just a score?
Yeah, well, as is often the case.
And frankly,
but what about Rate Your Builder? Different builders who are building a different product. Are they using, we have the Energy Star program, for example, or if you walk into the hardware store and you want to buy an appliance, there's a rating on the appliance.
EnerGuide,
EnerGuide appliance. So I can see that, and the question is, for me, is the government going after the individual home buyer because a home buyer is an individual who doesn't have an organization representing them? They don't have the strength, they don't have a lobby group themselves, versus if they go after the builders, for example, to prove their case or their worthiness, the builders have an association that's going to lobby back.
Well, the builders have an association, but the building codes are much more severe or much more stringent than they were years ago. So as history moves along, so does energy efficiency in construction.
Absolutely.
Standard construction.
Yeah.
Let's go back to houses or properties before that. Let's solve those. So it goes back to the idea is not bad, but I think the government wanted to do something because there was a crazy real estate market. There was fear in the marketplace. What's going to happen? I'll never be able to afford a house, etc.
Yeah.
So the government, in my opinion, think they had to do something to calm the public, and this is one of their solutions.
It's often the case, government, good ideas, no real proper course for implementing it. That's where it falls apart oftentimes, and we've seen that in the province.
Yeah, again, good intentions, but I think once we helped inform them, once we helped them understand what the fallout of this decision is, what this course of action, there's probably a better way.
And that's not to say Ontario Real Estate Association is against green initiatives and housing, and that's just there are better ways to do it.
But there's better ways with less damage down the road.
The
issue, frankly, sorry to interrupt you, Mike, but the issue with it's not about energy though, and it's about all it does is raise the cost of home ownership, of selling a home, and buyers would have to pay the cost of that on it. Therefore, a buyer can afford less now. So either everyone's house goes down in value because of that, by the cost of that process, or buyers have to pay more.
It creates a delay in the process.
It creates a delay in the process, but it also creates a layer of administration.
Huge, yeah.
And so who's paying for that? Who's winning for that? All we're doing is bloating government one more time.
The same taxpayer.
So we don't have a lot of time in this segment, so let's just wrap this one up. And what are we going to talk about when we come back?
I think when we come back, there was a campaign, I recall, from a couple of years ago, Don't Tax My Dream. The GTA put a second layer of municipal property tax on top of the existing land transfer tax. This was something government was looking at, spreading province-wide to all municipalities. We were strong, and when we come back from the break, maybe you can tell us a little bit, because I think you were there through that whole process, and tell us how that all unfolded.
All right.
Excellent.
Thank you very much for that. When we come back, you know where we're going. See you soon.
And we're back. I'm Mike Montague, the Arif Khan, and our special guest, Mike Douglas. Just before the break, we were talking about an initiative that OREA was involved with called Don't Tax My Dream. And it was centered around the taxation efforts that the GTA was putting in place that were looking to, land transfer taxes might have gone province-wide. Tell us a little bit about how that all unfolded.
Sure. For a number of years, for many years, the province of Ontario has had a land transfer tax. So anytime a property sells, there's a tax payable to the province of Ontario. Because of the City of Toronto Act, the City of Toronto, or not just the GTA, but the City of Toronto proper, has had the privilege of having their own land transfer tax in addition to the province.
In addition to.
And it's fairly close to exactly the same amount of money. So someone living in Toronto proper, selling their home, would pay a double land transfer tax.
And it's the seller paying it, not the buyer, but effectively it's factored into the price of the
buyer
pays it.
Oh, it is the
buyer
buyer, that's
Sorry,
right.
the buyer pays for it, for sure, yes. The large Urban Mayors Caucus of Ontario, LUMCO, lobbied the government substantially and got the government to agree to allow, or that they were going to allow municipalities all around the province the right to charge a land transfer tax should they choose to.
Yeah, opt in or opt out, yes.
I would like a list of those that would choose not to. Wasn't likely. Anyway, huge impact on the economy, frankly, and on the real estate market in Ontario. So what that would mean, in Barrie, Ontario, for example, if the average house price was X, say the average land transfer tax was $5,000 to $7,000, that would be another $5,000 to $7,000.
Yes, so on an already expensive process to get into.
Exactly. So the buyer pays that. And let's face it, most, especially first-time buyers, are buying all they can afford.
Yeah,
Where's
and
that
there's-
money supposed to go, Mike?
Well, the money would go to the municipalities for, every municipality needs tax money, for sure.
To pay for
Almost
the social
every-
housing needed for all the people who couldn't afford to buy a house.
Well, there's all kinds of
Well,
great places where
infrastructure
it's
in
supposed to
general.
go. That would
Yeah.
be up to municipalities, I would assume, but the reality is it's an enormous amount of money.
Yeah.
My own calculation in Barrie was about $42 million.
At a time when home prices year to year were already growing out of.
Yeah, what it does though is, if you think about it from the buyer's perspective, if you add a tax on top of the price, that means the buyer can't afford to pay as much as they could. Therefore, the buying power of the entire marketplace is reduced by a certain amount. So does that affect house prices? Probably.
It's funny
If
you
the
should say
buyers
that.
can't afford as much, people can't get as much, therefore the prices will probably go down.
And then you couple that with the fact that the federal government decided that we were going to change the qualifications, the stress test.
Exactly.
So there's another 20%.
Yeah.
So-
So back to the OREA role in this, it was something we lobbied hard for, and again, lobbying was really trying to educate
Yeah.
the MPPs. What is the effect of this? Like, it really isn't just a way to lighten the province's tax load or trickle down funding to the municipalities. The municipalities need money for sure, but this is not the place to get it.
Yeah.
Because it just affects home ownership in such a severe way. It's really nothing to do with realtors. It's got to do with consumers who want to buy property and sell property.
Yes.
Well,
And
let
it
me
affects
ask you
the
this though:
marketplace.
if you have, it affects the marketplace. I think that's the key statement
Absolutely.
there. It affects the marketplace. Anytime you artificially manipulate the marketplace, and that's so many of these moves that we've seen our government, provincially and federally, trying to do. They've tried to
100%.
cool the marketplace. They've tried to impose foreign buyers tax premiums, et cetera, on a group that's making up less than 3 to 4% of
Right.
the actual transactions,
Yep.
and they're manipulating the actual market.
Yep.
And it backfires.
Well, the impacts go far beyond what their intended actions or results are.
Well,
There's
think about it
always
from-
secondary, and there's a domino effect. that
Think
occurs
about it
all
from this
around the
perspective, though.
economy.
We have an affordable housing crisis. We have people who aren't able to find rental vacancies because we have developers who are refusing to build rental properties. They switch their applications over to condo ownership because they realize, well, I'm going to be stuck with a 1.8% increase.
Right.
So why would I get into that market?
Yep.
But now, if you put this additional land transfer tax
Right.
on there,
Right.
you're now forcing people to stay in rental housing if they're lucky enough to have it. They're not
Yeah.
going to buy,
Yep.
so you're putting backwards pressure on a
You-
system that's already overburdened.
And you exacerbate another problem,
Yeah.
the rental issue. Yeah,
Give
for
us,
sure.
Give us a little bit of an insight on that lobby process, how that works. You don't just go and knock at Kathleen Wynn's door. I'm thinking there's probably a whole system
not at
in
all.
place.
So there's a lot of research done, and analysis of how it would affect the economy, how it would affect individual homeowners, home buyers, and our job is to take a well-crafted, very professional, very informative package of information and make sure MPPs and their bureaucrats and their staff understand
You're
what the
there to
issues
enlighten
are.
them, not
Yeah,
just
exactly.
harass them.
It's not there
Yeah.
to pound on the door and say, you guys need to change your ways. Not a bit. It's information to say, if you do A, here's the repercussions of what happens.
Yeah.
Here's the cause and here's the effect. So while the intention again is good, the government's intention is to solve another issue. It's like the solution is a bigger problem than the problem.
So let me, and we've heard that a few times, they're solving problems that don't yet exist, but let me be a critic, if I might,
Yeah,
for
go
you.
ahead.
Let me be the person at the kitchen table saying, well, Mike, the government is trying to accomplish something, and you said here their intentions are good,
Yeah.
and municipalities need money.
Right.
Anybody can identify what the problem is. It doesn't take a genius to tell you that there's a problem. Where are you able to help them find a solution that'll still help them get what they need? In other words, more money to the municipality, but in a better way.
Well, that's a great question, Arif. The problem is inherent in every municipality and in the province as well. They need money. That's a whole other issue, why, and the efficiencies of that. But if we make home purchasing and home selling and home ownership less affordable, less attractive, there's less of it that goes on.
Mm-hmm.
Every home, every property that sells, there's an incredible spin-off of business. All kinds of measurements on that, but I did a lot of new homes over my career, And the average spin-off is somewhere in the $50,000 range.
It's
So what that means
and
is,
that's in the first few years
that means
following the sale.
Somebody's buying a lawnmower,
you
somebody's
buy
buying an air
exactly,
conditioner.
and you think of the people in that chain. So you buy a new home. So first of all, there are planners, there's developers, there's bulldozer drivers, there's engineers. You've got lawyers, and you've got accountants, and you've got contractors, and you've got builders, and you've got window suppliers and carpet suppliers. Everybody along this chain. That's to get the product built. The person moves into that, and within the first year or so, there's another roughly $50,000 on average, which means, as you say, lawnmowers, landscaping, swimming pools, appliances.
Am I
It's
correct?
amazing.
25% of the GDP for Canada is related to the housing market. Am I correct?
I don't know that that's correct, but I would bet that sounds actually
up
low
there.
to me, frankly.
Yeah, it sounds low. Okay.
Because it's not just the property, it's the spin-off
Right.
effect. Right? So every time you stop someone from buying, you stop that entire spin-off residual from that particular purchase. And then amortize that over many, many thousands.
And housing's a vital component of all our lives, even outside the economic, just socially. It's
Just the personal
important.
part of it. Like it's not just money. It's if
Yeah.
you in Canada, when you own a home, the home ownership means so much to people. Like it's a sense of security. It's a sense of accomplishment. It's a sense of safety for my kids and my family. It's not just
Security,
It's not just
absolutely.
money.
Yeah.
It has a huge effect on our culture.
And at the same time, the ratio of homeowners versus renters in Canada, that ratio is higher here than in most other countries in the world.
I was going to
believe.
ask you that. Do you know where we are?
I don't know the
comparative?
numbers, but I do know when I think of traveling around the world, very few countries, especially Europe, older cities, I don't see very many single-family detached homes.
Yeah.
Right.
We happen to have miles and miles, or kilometers and
We're unique
kilometers
in that
of
regard,
kilometers
North
and
America.
kilometers.
Yeah.
What's that?
I say we're unique in North America in that regard. To
we have
how
space,
we live.
right?
Yeah.
And let's face it, our country is only 150 years old.
Yeah.
So
the time to do it.
we have lots of space, and lucky us, this is not normal in the world. So we have a unique opportunity, frankly. Yeah.
We're going to break.
Okay.
So what are we going to do when we
I
come
think
back?
when we
Mike?
come back, I'd like to talk more about the whole issue of affordability and what OREA does, what they're currently doing, what they're planning to do, and what you'd like to see being done that you think can help keep housing prices and values in check. Because I know, well, as you say, we've seen
Bridge the gap.
Yeah, we need to breach that gap because we've been seeing prices climb. So when we come back,
We'll be right back. And welcome back to Hitting Home. Mike and I are joined by Mike Douglas. You've been a realtor for 24 years, you were telling me?
That's correct.
And you've spent a good portion of your career as an advocate for the industry and for homeowners, obviously. So thanks for being here with us.
My pleasure.
We were talking just before the break about the role of government and how your organization helps guide legislation and shape legislation and make sure that those who are in government who may or may not be as in tune with the actual industry, what the implications are of their decisions and how they can best accomplish their goals, really.
Sure, absolutely, yeah.
And then we also touched on obviously the affordability issue in Ontario.
Yep.
And I guess one of the things that we're looking for as we go forward is what can we anticipate going forward? We may be having a change on the horizon as we come up with a provincial election and municipal elections coming up this year. So can you work with different levels of government? What might you anticipate with going in with a new government?
For sure, we can work with all levels and all parties. We're not a partisan organization at all. We're an industry organization whose focus is to inform legislators. So what side of the floor you're on is not the issue to us.
the goals remain the same.
The goal, yeah.
Well, the goals remain the same, and we also know these are long-term issues. These are not just this term, this term, this term.
Yes.
These are decisions made by any government that affect the consumer, the homeowner, the home seller, for many years down the road. So in our advocacy efforts, yes, we meet with the government on a regular basis. We also meet with the opposition, all three parties, all the MPPs, as often as we can. We have a very good working relationship with them, frankly. We are We respect them and they respect us. Our job is to give them information that's useful to them so they can make good decisions.
I think something that's actually really quite relevant, and maybe this just came to my mind, to be quite honest with you, but you and your industry representatives spend a lot more time at the door and with the general public than any one of them possibly could do. And it's not a judgment on them, it's the reality of it.
For sure, the same with every business, every industry, it's the same thing. I agree with you. I would say to my own clients, my job is to bring you really good information, and your job is to decide what to do with that.
Correct.
And I look at that with the advocacy the same way with the government. Our job as the Ontario Real Estate Association is to bring those MPPs very good factual data, information, analysis, and strategies, and their job is to decide what to do with that.
I'm going to throw this out there. I didn't ask your permission to do this, but bottom line is, you said offline, you said there's a difference between good governance and politics.
100%.
Tell me about that.
Well, I think this is in every level of government. The public, watch the media, watch the news, watch all the debates. The public is attracted to and tends to vote for the best politician. In my opinion, we should be looking for the best governors.
Yes.
And because it's
Stewards.
Government we need. We need good, efficient, diligent, fiscally responsible governors, government, but we elect politicians.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean they're bad. It just means we focus on the wrong things. We focus on the show.
Shiny beads and
the
trinkets.
show, a good politician doesn't necessarily mean a good governor. And quite often, a really good governor doesn't necessarily make a good politician.
Yeah. Campaigning and governing are two different things. And some
Totally
are
different.
really good at one
Right.
and
But the public
not as effective
responds
at the other.
to politics, not governance.
Yeah.
I think it's important to understand that, frankly.
Absolutely.
They should be teaching that more in school.
So we do have an. Some would call it a crisis. Some would just say we have an issue with the fact that the market pressures that we've seen, and our prices, I don't think are that out of whack if you look at other major metropolitan areas, New York or Paris or whatever it might be.
Yep.
However, for us,
Yeah.
with our living wages, with what our standards of living are, with our average household's ability of earning capacity, if you will, there continues to be a gap
Right.
that is increasing.
For sure.
And how are we going to bridge that gap was really
Yes.
what we went to break on. How are we going to, what are some ideas that we can do to bridge that gap?
Yeah, you're right. There's a constant increase in cost for everything we buy, including homes. Home ownership is more expensive. That's a very simple question, and it's a very, very complex answer. I don't have all the answers.
Well, do
But
we
one
have to
thing-
change our expectations?
Well, I think we have. I think the government has to be careful not to do this piling on thing. Again,
Right.
solving their problem by going back to the same taxpayer and saying, not only are you paying taxes you're unhappy with the amount, but also now we're going to tax you on your house sale. Now we're going
Here's
to
a new
add
way to
cost
get
you.
money from you.
So I think that's the piling on side. I think we just have to realize that keep the issue simple. Supply and demand is a big issue. The more supply of housing we have, the more affordable housing becomes, right? If there is a small supply of housing, it's expensive, and competition for it creates price increases.
Excellent. I want to bring it around to close out here, and we can talk on this for a few minutes. Just professional standards within the industry.
Yep.
It's something we're always conscious of.
Yep.
At OREA, I'd say there's even a heightened consciousness. We have a new EO there, Tim Hudak, who I know is really focused on keeping those standards at a level.
Yeah.
And the higher those standards are, the better it serves the public. It's not just an internal thing. It's ultimately for the public at large.
Absolutely,
out there.
Mike, yeah.
Now we're making changes to our education structure and how we are educated as realtors.
Yeah.
What other things do you see happening? Would you like to see happening to improve on those standards?
Yeah, the professional standards is a big deal. Also in Ontario, the Real Estate and Business Brokers Act, which is the legislation under which real estate transacts.
REBA, yes.
REBA. That legislation is now under review, and we're part of that review.
Because when was that originally written?
It was REBA 2002, which
Yeah.
came into effect in 2006.
So it's due for an update.
So it's been a long time. Yeah, and actually Tim Hudak was the guy who
original.
introduced that piece of legislation at the time. So to answer your question, Mike, we want higher standards for realtors. We want. I think it's good. I think it could be a lot better.
How does it reflect to the public,
Well,
in your
that's my
opinion?
point. I think
Yeah.
the higher the standard, so the more ethical, the more the more regulation that we have to live under, the harder it is to get into the business, the more education you require, the more continual education you require, and the more severe penalties, more regulation. Like, we don't want bad apples in our business. No. We've got 70,000 members in OREA. There's about 100,000 licensed real estate professionals registered in the province. We don't want any bad apples.
Oh, I'll put things into perspective. I have a mortgage brokerage, and I've had some really good people come and want to sell product or deliver services under our brand. And you know, I don't say this to be condescending in any way, shape, or form to any one particular individual, but I had a fellow who come in and said, well, I kind of want to, you know, give it a shot. I know what I'm doing, and I have some people that I could serve. And I said, well, okay, but is this going to be a full-time profession for you? He said, well, I do deliver pizza. And I'm not knocking somebody who delivers pizza.
For sure.
But what I'm saying is, if you're delivering pizza or anything else, while at the same time, you know, you're wearing your delivery hat while you're handing out your business card as a mortgage professional, I think that calls into question, one, your level of commitment, your level of understanding, and as well, you know, your ability to dedicate yourself to that profession. It isn't a part-time. There are a lot of people who are in our field, whether it's real estate or mortgages or something similar, who do that part-time. This should be a full-time profession. And we got to wrap it up. But how would you answer that, and what would you want to tell the public?
I would say high standards is important, high ethics, great education, well-informed, professional, ethical. Consumer will benefit from the best qualified realtor they can get.
Excellent. Well, Mike and I want to thank you very much, Mike, for joining us. I think we could go on, and we actually offline were talking about another topic that we could come back with. So we want to thank you for being here. We do hope to have you back on the show.
My pleasure.
Excellent. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
We'll see you again on Heading Home.